I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Whoa, I'm not Julian. Whoa. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the CJ Show here on SDPN. I'm Steve Dangle, filling in for Julian McKenzie. And that is, of course, Chris Johnston in what I think is a hookah lounge.
Something like that. I'm here in Prague covering the World Hockey Championship for the Athletic. And this is like a lounge in the basement of the hotel. So it felt like the most appropriate place to record the episode.
It is. It is. It definitely is.
I don't have a
really
tumbler of whiskey on the rocks, but that would be appropriate for the setting.
Absolutely. Do you have a game today?
I do not. Today is an off day for me and for Canada. So, I mean, I had to go to the rink and cover some practices and the like, but no games tonight.
Excellent, buddy. Excellent. Well, I hope you get after it and you're able to go to an actual bar or something like that. Do you treat these trips the way you used to? I feel like at this stage in your career, you're more concerned with finding the best running spot in Prague.
I definitely don't treat them like I once did. I mean, I think, it's a product of anyone's age. As the older you get, your priorities maybe shift, or your energy levels are not where they were, or all of the above. But it's been a nice trip here. But quite honestly, there's been nothing approaching chaos or anything like that. And for sure, early in my career, when I did some World Hockey Championships, there were some chaotic nights because it's here on offer. But it's awesome to be here. I love being in Europe. The tournament itself, well, I understand for most of our listeners and those back in North America, it doesn't get a ton of attention. I mean, it's really unique and cool, and there's fans from all over the place. And I've been blown away, Steve. In Prague here, at every game, there's 17,000 people. Canada,
Wow.
Austria had 17,000 people in Prague. It made no sense because, obviously Canadians are proud hockey fans, but there's only so many on the ground here in Prague. So it's been really fun to cover. And so most of my time has been work. I haven't even really done a lot of sightseeing, but I have been getting my runs in. So don't worry about that.
Okay, good. No, I was worried about that. When obviously we're going to get to some NHL stuff, and just so happened I get to host a show with you, the first show after Craig Berube signs with the Leafs. But what goes into this assignment? Is this is going to the World Hockey Championship something that you asked to do, or is it something that you're assigned to do from I assume TSN, because they're the rights holder, or is it the Athletic?
No, I'm here primarily for the Athletic. And in this case, I asked to do it. And, you might not know this, or I don't know to what degree everyone who listens to the show followed my career. But, one of the coolest things I got to do early in my career when I worked at the Canadian Press many years ago is I went to 7 World Hockey Championships from 2006 through 2012. And I always thought it was a little bit of an underappreciated tournament from a North American perspective, both in the quality of the hockey that's played, but certainly from, if you do my job, I mean, I have seen multiple NHL general managers here, multiple assistant general managers, lots of agents, lots of scouts. Obviously the players in the tournament, there's star players representing all the countries, and they're all in one place. When you think about that, outside of the, I guess the Olympics, there's nothing quite like it. I mean, in one day, you can theoretically talk to Victor Hedman, Erik Karlsson, David Pastrnak, John Tavares. I'm just going off the top of my head of people here, and then plus, the GMs and the like that are all around. So, I've always wanted to get back here. And, I basically, with Best on Best Hockey coming back here in the next couple of years with the Four Nations face-off, the Olympics in 2026, I said this might be a good time to try to come here. So, I'm not really here covering the games. I'm going to the games, of course, and interacting with everyone, but I'm really more writing feature stories and getting access to a lot of people in one place, which is what makes it unique. And so I'm really grateful the Athletic went for it. If David Pastrnak doesn't score in Game 7 against Toronto, I'm probably, covering a Leafs second round playoff series. I mean, I realize the second round's winding down now, but I wouldn't be here. And it was only really in the last couple of days before I flew over last week that it was confirmed I was coming. But it actually has been everything I hoped for and more. And as I start rolling out more of the stories that I've been working on, I hope my bosses agree with that assessment.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. At very least, I will agree with how they spent their money. How's that? Does my word mean anything in this case?
It does, man.
No?
You're among the people I call boss. So I mean, if you're happy with me, then that's a good start. And honestly, it's cool. I mean, you got Connor Bedard here too. I mean, there's a lot of people. You know, again, I realize back home that people aren't fixated on this just yet, but I mean, we're getting into an interesting window with international hockey where it's going to be at the forefront of everyone's minds again. Like, I think the next Team Canada, there's going to be some big surprises on who's included in that team, just because there's a real cutoff point from when we last had best on best, right? I mean, if you look at the players that were there in 2014 in Sochi or even 2016 at the World Cup, you know, a lot of those players have aged out or retired or onto other things. And so there's real opportunities for new players to kind of come in and be part of the national program. And I think we're going to be in for what, I don't know what we call it, a new wave of interest in international hockey, new storylines. Obviously the US is going to be a big favorite probably heading into these tournaments with the number of star players they have. And then Canada's going to be trying to hold on to its piece of ground. And we're maybe not as strong as we once were, quite frankly. I mean, certainly question marks in goal, but even the blue line is going to be mostly turned over from where we last were, I think, as a country. And, you know, it's, you know, the Duncan Keiths and Drew Doughties and Scott Niedermayer from 2010. I mean, all these players, Chris Pronger, they're nowhere to be found anymore. And so I'm curious to see how this tournament is just a little bit of an appetizer, the smallest little appetizer, the amuse-bouche of international hockey. But I think we're in for a pretty compelling 18 months or so, or 2 years of you know, tournaments to come.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see it all develop. I think it's a tournament for hardcores, right? It's a tournament for sick puppies. So when you say, you know, it might not have the same appeal in Canada, I still think everyone listening to this show, I mean, if you're going out of your way to listen to a hockey podcast for 45 minutes an hour, you're a sick puppy. Like this tournament is absolutely for you. You're interested in Canada blowing a 5-goal lead to Austria or holding Norway to, was it Norway? To, who was the team that they held to 2 shots, but they scored on the second one?
Norway.
It was Norway. Yeah.
And
like
it's into the third period with 0 shots. Like, I've covered a lot of hockey games at all levels. I've never seen that anywhere.
No.
Like, I'm sure
so when they almost tied it
in the history of time, but it's a pretty unusual thing.
Yeah, you'd have to really go deep into the scrapbooks, probably find some stones with records chiseled into it to find when that happened. Like, I can't think of it either. I find it difficult as a Canadian because I find myself in those games cheering a little bit for the other team. You know what I mean? It's a way better story.
It makes sense. I mean, like, if you're, it was 6-1 for Canada over Austria at the second intermission of that game, right? So you couldn't be sitting at home if you were watching that going like, I hope Canada wins 10-1. I mean, I guess you could be, but like, nobody really has ever wanted to watch a team win 10-1 in a hockey game. I mean, and so it's actually far more compelling just from, again, a neutral hockey viewing position to see Austria score 5 goals. Austria had never scored more than 2 goals at any level against Canada anywhere. And they somehow scored 5 in the third period of that game against what's still a pretty good Canadian team. Like, it's not like this is not a team of scrubs by any stretch. And, you know, somehow push. It's like, it's so cool being in an arena when something like that turns. Like, I can't explain it, but I felt it lots of places. You know, Boston 2013 was one of them. But there's lots of others, like, where the momentum just totally shifts against a team that has it. And it almost feels like there's nothing the other team can do. And it weirdly felt that way. Like, it's hard to explain, but it went 6-2, I think, with about 3 minutes into the third. 6-3. It was 6-4 by about the midway point of the period. And by that point, you're like, oh, wow. Like, I think this is going to actually happen. And then, of course, on the first shift of overtime, John Tavares was like, this can't happen. And basically
Yeah.
makes an individual offensive play that, I say with respect, but I don't think any of the Austrians would probably be capable of. Maybe Marco Rossi, I suppose, but, and ends the game. So and we're just in the business end of the tournament now. I mean, I've just watched 2 games. Canada played Finland and Switzerland the last 2 days, which were very high-level games. Like, frankly, what's interesting, and again, won't be talked about a lot, is Connor Bedard looked a little overmatched in those games. And, I was texting with some people back home. They're like, well, why'd that be? He played in the NHL all year. And I'm like, yeah, but this is, like, it's intense hockey. Like, when you're watching it up close, this is, I'm not pounding the table saying you should be watching this over the Stanley Cup playoffs, but it's playoff level intensity. Is very physical. And, especially Finland and Switzerland. I mean, these teams are some of the top teams in the tournament. He's playing against fully grown men that have played in games like this before. And so, and this leads into a game against Czechia on Tuesday, which will be, the home nation here for Canada. David Pastrnak just showed up on the scene today, fresh off of breaking the Leafs' heart. Steve, here he is to try to dash some Canadian hopes for you. So I'm guessing you won't be cheering for him if you happen to catch that game on Tuesday.
You know what? I admire it because I was watching the other day and I saw Marty Necas was there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, really? Like, you just got knocked out of the second round and Pastrnak just got knocked out of the second round. Like, typically it's guys who don't make the playoffs. Sometimes you see reinforcements join after the first round. After the second round, like, it's obviously a priority for them. Like, it means something. So I actually kind of admire it.
Well, and Pastrnak actually told the local media here that it was, and this is a translated quote, a problem with the Bruins, essentially, that, like, maybe in a perfect world, they weren't so enthused for him to come over. But, obviously, given that it's in his home nation, I mean, even, I don't think Czechia has another tournament at any point in the coming years. I mean, this might be a one time only chance for someone like David Pastrnak to come home and play national team games on home soil in front of his family and friends. And so he certainly made it sound like, based on what I read in the Czech media, that he had to, sort of pound the table to come over. And that's something, and I don't say this against Canadian players, but it's just, you wouldn't see the same level, but it's because, let's face it, very few or no Canadian players grew up watching this tournament. David Pastrnak watched the Czech national team every year in May play in this tournament, and he dreamed of this since he was a kid. And obviously, as a country, they've won some world championships, but it's been a long time, and they have a pretty strong team here, and they want to win again. They want to win at home. As I said, even the games involving countries that aren't too involved here are, like, selling out. It's crazy. So there's a lot of excitement around this. There's going to be more than 500,000 fans, I think, that watch the games here in Prague. Wow. So, I mean, it's seriously, it's hard to explain from afar, but there's, like, a lot of hype around it. So I could see, if you're him, and, even my Finnish colleagues, there's 5.5 million people in Finland, and the first game they played of the tournament, 1.6 million people watched the TV version of that. Like, think of, I mean, a quarter of the country are watching that game. So how few things ever galvanize an audience to that degree in any given country? It's very small. I mean, I don't know. I doubt the Super Bowl does that in the States. Maybe it does. I'm trying to think of what would be the equivalent. But, if you're from
short list,
right? If you're from some of these European nations like Finland, Czech Republic, Sweden, I think that this is I know in Sweden, for example, this is the biggest hockey event of the year. Like, they have multiple TV crews here on the ground doing everything. Like, it's the way we treat maybe the Stanley Cup final or something equivalent to that. So, long way of saying, underrated tournament. Glad to be here. And, it's actually really cool you could just spend an hour at the rink and see, like, people from, it's just like the whole hockey world in one place. It's kind of like the draft or something like that, but with players too.
So I guess we might as well jump into it with, I mean, it happens to be a Leafs heavy news time, right? Like, we're not shoehorning it in here. The Leafs just hired their 32nd or 41st coach. I keep seeing those two different numbers out there. It's Craig Berube. It seems to have happened very fast. How did this all play out after the season ended?
Well, it definitely happened fast, and that's because there were only so many candidates that were really seriously under consideration here from Brad Treliving. And so, from what was it, firing Sheldon Keefe last Thursday to the Friday press conference with Kelly and Shanahan, and then to the following Friday, you've got Craig Berube. Basically, in a 8-day span, you've fired your previous head coach, done the search, and signed a contract with the new guy. And that alone just tells you there's only so much time, and especially given that Berube spent 2 days in Toronto over that weekend doing an interview. Todd McClellan also interviewed. I think the Leafs inquired on some other folks just to see, maybe throw some Hail Marys out there, but nothing really clicked. And then they also spoke to Gerard Gallant. And so really you're looking at a very experienced group of candidates. And I think Berube, it kind of felt a little actually like the Treliving situation last year, right? I mean, the day that Kyle Dubas gets fired, I mean, you can go look at the stories. I mean, a lot of people were saying, well, I guess now that they've done this, Brad Treliving's the most logical replacement. And I don't know that a lot of other people were ever seriously considered then. You had a small handful of experienced coaches here, and they go with Berube. And I think it's an interesting choice. It's it's hard to know how this group's going to respond to him. Obviously he has that Stanley Cup win in St. Louis under his belt, but obviously doesn't have a lot of other long playoff runs with that team. I mean, I think it's a bit of a bold play, and he gets a 4-year contract too. So, I mean, that will only matter to Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment if he doesn't see it through, because they'll just have to pay him for that time. But, it's not necessarily affects the fan base any, but they've given him a pretty strong show of support with the contract. But, this is a move designed clearly to have the Leafs be in a position to try to win next season. Like, this is not a developmental hire, right? This is getting a specific response from a specific kind of coach known to be, I'd say hard on his players, or maybe very honest and forthright and upfront and direct with his players might be the best way to describe it. And maybe not it's not a tactical decision. Obviously when the coaching staff gets rounded out, I think there'll be members of the staff that do some of the more tactical aspects of the game at a sort of different level. But this isn't about changing the system. It's about changing the culture. And, let's see how that works out.
Well, so I want to talk about the culture a bit, because anyone who has paid attention, not even that closely, to the Leafs and Sheldon Keefe, and specifically his public words, over the last few years, know that this year was different for him,
For sure.
at least in how he handled the team. You can probably count the amount of times he publicly criticized his players on one hand, and you could count the amount of times he walked those criticisms back on the same hand. This year was very, very different, and I got to imagine that came directly from Brad Treliving.
I don't know if it was directly from Brad Treliving as much as I think Sheldon Keefe just recognized that this was a year that the team needed to take a step forward for him. This was his year as a Leafs coach, that if they didn't take a step forward, he was likely going to be fired. And obviously that's what happened. But I found Sheldon to be a very aware guy, very in tune with a lot of things. And I think he just understood that they needed results this year. And so he was going to maybe push things a little further than we've seen him do it in the past to try to get them. Some of it worked. They got within one shot in Game 7. I mean, if they win that overtime period, I mean, maybe we're not talking about that changing. I mean, I don't know that for sure. And it's a hypothetical. Quite frankly, like, Brad Treliving would never go down that road, I don't think, in answering it, because really you have to see how everything plays out, even in the second round, before deciding. I mean, if they get through Game 7 against Boston and then get swept by Florida, maybe you're like, the team still hasn't progressed. They're still the same kind of team. And so, it was clear, though, the Leafs needed results this year, and there was not a time to be patient. And, it was one more year removed from Kyle Dubas, who had hired Sheldon Keefe from being in a position of power. And so I think that's what informed his approach. And you have to remember, like, Sheldon Keefe was brought in at a different time. I mean, a lot of those players were young, right? It's not that he was brought in to coddle them, but I think certainly he was brought in to make them, to take a different approach than Mike Babcock had, he puts Marner and Matthews together right off the hop, which they basically never had. And for the bulk of the time he was the head coach, they played together. Obviously, there were some specific instances, including this season, where they didn't, and including in the playoffs, actually. But they spent a lot of time together. Like, I think he was there to try to bring them sweetness. Whereas, it's pretty clear at this point, new GM or new-ish GM, he's coming up on a year, Brad Treliving, new head coach, new president above Brendan Shanahan. I mean, as much as we focus and, for obvious reasons on the core of the team, I think this is going to be a different kind of year. And I think hiring Craig Berube right now, frankly, you bring him in so that no one's all that comfortable. I think this is all about challenging and reevaluating, for each of those individual players, what more can you get out of yourself? What buttons can be pushed? And unless Craig Berube comes in and totally acts differently than he did as a head coach, which I can't see why he would in St. Louis. I mean, after a certain game, he might say Austin Matthews wasn't good enough, or he might say, Morgan Riley needs to do this better, or he had a very clear pattern with the Blues of identifying specific issues, not shying away from discussing them publicly, and then certainly from what I can gather privately, that was even more pronounced too. So, who knows where this all leads? Like it's hard. I don't think anyone can sit here with any certainty and say this is going to work or it's not going to work. I mean, who knows? But it's going to be fascinating because it's going to play out more public than I think a lot of the things that happened previously did.
Parking Berube in the core for a second, unsatisfactory results. We talked about could someone have saved their job? Could Keefe have saved his job if they score in overtime and they make it to the second round? I keep harping on this point, and part of the reason that I'm doing that is because I know I'm missing something. So I want to ask someone smarter than me. Brendan Shanahan has been here for 10 years. They've won one playoff series. This is just me talking in my fans' opinion, but he has assembled a team that has played consistently over the years, nothing like him. Like this is one of the best power forwards of all time. 600 goals, Hockey Hall of Fame, multiple cup wins, would fight anyone, including Craig Berube, which is a horrible decision if you look at the game notes. That guy was a tough nut as a player. Why is Brendan Shanahan still the president of the Leafs despite the lack of results?
I think it's because he's got term on his contract and because it's not a simple matter of replacing him. I mean, what it takes to be a president of a team is a little different skill set than like the average person doesn't have it. Right. And I think that obviously he's kept the confidence of his bosses for a time. What has changed is that there's now real oversight, or I think there's more day-to-day oversight into the hockey ops department from the ownership level that probably wasn't there when Shanahan basically dealt with the board directly for a lot of his time. I mean, once upon a time, he was hired by Tim Lewicki, who had the role that Keith Pelly has today, but Tim moved on within 2 or 3 months of that hiring. And I think it was a rather passive board into what the Leafs were doing. From a business standpoint, which is part of the president's job, the organization performs well. They had players winning awards they haven't won before. They were having success in the regular season they haven't had before. And you get down to this moment now where I just think it would have been tough for Keith Pelly starting his new role at the beginning of April to come in and just fire absolutely everybody. But, my read on what's going on here is that it's really basically a 1 year for him situation where there has to be some steps forward. I don't know exactly what that is. And in fact, I think it falls into the same category as my previous comment about Sheldon Keefe. I mean, I think everyone just has to see it happen and play out. But it's not as though the Leafs make round 3 next year, he's automatically saved or isn't. I think it's maybe a little more nuanced than that. But the long answer is, I don't think that there was that many people scrutinizing him day to day internally. And I do think that's changed. And so, do you know what else has also changed? Brendan Shanahan, which I'm sure you're aware, said at this press conference, that things have to change. Like he has been, when you're talking, like you're focused and you're not incorrect that they don't have players that didn't play like him. I think he was focused too heavily on another thing that he learned from his playing days, which was that, the Red Wings were written off many times as a core group before he got there, frankly, but like Steve Yzerman and players on that team were known as a group that couldn't win. And, Steve Yzerman was almost traded to the Ottawa Senators in 1996. Thank goodness for the Red Wings that they didn't do that, because they won the Cup in 97, 98, 2002. And now he's in a position where he's back there as the GM of the team and ended up playing his entire career with that organization. But, it took till the 13th year for Steve Yzerman in the NHL to win a Stanley Cup, and he ended up doing it where he was. And so I think that has always informed a certain amount of the way Brendan Shanahan looked at his team and the way he looked at the world, and that he wanted to be uber patient. But finally his patience has run out, because either it's just seeing one more year of the same results, or maybe it's the fact that he's now got someone, looking over his shoulder a little more closely. And, the reason we're having this discussion is because he would be aware the writing is on the wall, that there's only so long you get to do any of these jobs. Cam Neely is a good comparison, the former player who's spent a long time as a Bruins president. But the one difference, of course, is that the Bruins have won a whole whack of playoff series and won Stanley Cup and been to 2 other finals in Cam's time there. That's helped him keep his job. We're at the results stage for Shanahan. And I don't talk about regular season results. I think where they have to have a playoff run and take meaningful steps there for him to stay employed. And so, yeah, they haven't played in his mold. And, I think that he was a little too fixated on, you can't change anything, because the Red Wings, held tight with Yzerman, and it finally paid off, and Fedorov and the like. The Red Wings also traded for Brendan Shanahan, right? They made big deals. And I believe Keefe Primo was involved in that trade, right? Going the other way, and ended up, obviously he had a great career and was a treasured prospect at the time, was a good young player in the league. So, they've been too risk averse, I think, as an organization for my liking. I've written that on many occasions in the last 3 years in particular. And I think that risk aversion is finally out the window now, which makes this it's a compelling offseason on like every level for the Leafs. I mean, you are changing out a coach. You have a relatively new GM, so who's going to act differently than the prior GM? Who's going to, he now has another year of seeing things from the inside to make decisions based off of about who stays and who goes and what the needs are. No secret to you, Steve, that Brad Living is going to want a different looking blue line than what the Leafs have had. And so now we enter this brave new world from the Leafs perspective. And I think it's going to be a very fascinating June in particular, and then into early July when free agency and everything gets going there.
So this connects everything, right? So Shanahan wanted to keep the Leafs core together because the Red Wings, when he was with the Red Wings, didn't blow up their core. The Red Wings, like, we have the power of hindsight here. It's like, so does he. So it's weird to me that he's missed. The Leafs do not have one of the top 5 defensemen of all time on their roster like the Red Wings did. And it connects to Craig Berube, because I'm not saying he's a top 5 defenseman of all time, but you could definitely argue at points in his career, he's been a top 5 defenseman in the league. When the St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup, they had Alex Pietrangelo. There's no one like that in the Leafs organization. Love Morgan Rielly, not close. Like not close to the Lidstrom conversation, and not even particularly close to the Pietrangelo conversation. So how does that tie in to the Leafs' plans? Because those players are typically not easily available. Lidstrom was drafted. Petro was drafted. How the hell do they go out and get this guy?
I'd be making a lot more money than I am if I had a good answer for that. I mean, I would be in a position. It's funny. I did an interview here in Czech Republic with a newspaper, and the first question was, "Can you explain to us why the Leafs haven't won a cup in 50 plus years?" And I was like, if I could actually answer that question with credibility and a serious answer, I'd be in the wrong profession. I should be going and working for them and putting that to work. So, what I think is going to happen is you're going to see, obviously there's turnover coming. TJ Brody's walking out the door. There's a decision to be made on restricted free agent Timothy Liljegren. I think that they brought in some, we'll call them heavier bottom pairing guys at the trade deadline that are both UFAs and Edmondson and Lyubushkin, but maybe there's an opportunity to at least hold on to one of them. I think they're at least going to get bigger and tougher through some set of circumstances. But in terms of like, how do you find the number one, like 25 minute per night in the playoffs kind of guy? I don't see it, honestly. I mean, at least the Leafs were interested in Pietrangelo when he became a free agent after that cup win in 2019. Like at least they recognized the need for him and were hoping to sign him, but they just couldn't compete with what Vegas did in terms of, at that time fitting that contract in. And I'm not sure he was going to come here anyway. I mean, that's the other aspect of it, is he had the ability to choose his situation carefully. But free agency is not usually the answer nowadays. I mean, it's the answer for sort of middle of the roster players. Like, I think there's definitely a case to be made that you can improve the overall strength of your team through free agency. But I just feel like, absent maybe a few exceptions, in today's NHL, there's not top of the roster guys in free agency. I mean, of course, Pietrangelo is one of them, but that was 5 years ago, right? I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, they're not there every year perennially. There's not any one player that is a defenseman that's going to be available on July 1st that I think makes sense to say that he could be that number one guy. And so, maybe in this trade, if you're trading one of the core guys, maybe you get that back. But I think more than likely they're going to have to settle for incremental improvements internally with some of the decisions that are made, and trudge ahead and hope to basically draft and develop that guy one day. But the Leafs haven't done a very good job of that, right? I mean, if we want to look over with hindsight, like, how many defensemen have they developed and drafted? I mean, Riley's one of them. He was a 5th overall pick, and he's been in the league a long time. They traded away Sandin. Like, they just have not developed many defensemen. There's no way around it.
If we're looking at depth guys, like guys who were picked late and developed and had meaningful NHL careers, you're probably going all the way back to like Carl Gunnarsson, and right before him, like Thomas Caberlet. Like, you're going back. You're going really far back. They've done a number of things very well. I think they've drafted a lot of forwards who have had meaningful careers. I'm encouraged by their goaltending depth, at least like in terms of guys who will be ready in a few years, not yet. But defensemen, woof, it's a really, really short list, man. They, the team I'm constantly jealous of is Dallas. Like, they're masterful at this stuff, and it feels like every draft pick they hit.
Dallas, Anaheim has done a great job of finding defensemen. Like, it just seems like they always have. Like, I don't know if you watched this Pavel Mintyukov this year. Like, he's just another younger guy who wasn't taken right. He wasn't taken with the 3rd overall pick, and like, looks like he has huge upside. I mean, they traded Hampus Lindholm to Boston, but that's been a great pickup for Boston. Obviously, Shea Theodore ended up in Vegas. Theodore. Like, so many defensemen have come through the Ducks, and you're right. It's just like some teams get it. I mean, obviously, there's a certain degree of luck involved in drafting. Like, there's no way around that. And, especially when you say, "Oh, Team X found this player in the 6th round." Well, it's like, if Team X knew he was going to be that good, why did they pass on him in the 5 previous rounds? So, I mean, there's always, I feel like, 2 edges to that conversation and that sword. But the Leafs have drafted a lot of defensemen, and they just haven't turned many into NHLers. And then some that they have, it's like they trade Rasmus Sandin away. Like, some of them have to go somewhere else to maybe even have that chance. And so, I do think for Treliving, he's always liked big and, trending towards mean blue lines. And so I do feel, as they sort of move around the pieces this summer, we're going to see a bit of a trend of that. I mean, obviously there's quite a number of holes to fill with players on expiring deals if they all leave, but that brings with it some opportunity, because there's going to be some new cap space to spend as well.
Getting back to, Berube, new bench boss, and everything, there have been rumors about how his bench is going to flush out. He's reunited with Mike Van Ryn, who he had in St. Louis. I imagine his job is safe. What's your feel for the other Leafs assistants who are on the bench? And do you have anything on this rumor of Mark Savard, who was on Berube's staff in St. Louis, coming to the Leafs from the Flames?
Well, look, I mean, the Leafs have had Dean Chenault and Manny Malhotra as assistants for a couple of years now. I think it's less and less likely you see them return. Um, they hired Guy Boucher last summer, but he was running the power play rather. And, that obviously was not a strength, especially the way the season ended. I mean, for a lot of the season, it wasn't something we would identify as a problem. The problem was when it really mattered, it was not there for them, and that needed to be a difference maker. So you wonder about that spot. And so I think that there's certainly some smoke to the Mark Savard talks. I just don't know how it all works. I mean, he's still under contract in Calgary. He's only been with the Flames for 1 year, although generally speaking, these things can be worked out. The fact that there's a lot of Calgary ties in the air, like I don't know how that'll all shake down, but needless to say, I think it's going to be a pretty different looking staff. Every reason to believe Mike Van Ryn will stay, given that he's got the prior working relationship with Craig Berube, and he's also, was just in his first year on the Leafs bench, and every coach that comes in usually gets a couple choices anyway to add to the staff, and so I don't get the sense that there's too much else like that's already decided. I think it came together pretty quick from the Leafs end. It also came together pretty quick from Craig Berube's end. I mean, he had talked to New Jersey, talked to Ottawa, did an interview with Winnipeg. I mean, he was talking to other teams. So, and those teams all had various dynamics with who was signed and who might have stayed. And so, I think he's still now working through that point of time. And, when he meets the media on Tuesday, I'm sure that, maybe he'll give a little bit more insight into what he's thinking. But my understanding as of, when we're recording now is he's still just looking around the league to see who's available, who might make sense, and hasn't really started his own process too deeply on who's going to come and work for this team just yet.
Well, one of the names the Leafs are rumored to be looking at, I mentioned Mark Savard. I forgot about
DJ Smith.
Really juicy one with DJ Smith. What are you hearing there? Is there any legitimacy to that rumor? I'm trying to remember the last time an assistant left a team and then rejoined them.
Oh, it's got to have happened somewhere, but I'm with you. It's not like there's not obvious examples sitting on the table in front of us that we're thinking of. But I mean, it's a different era, right? I mean, DJ Smith, since leaving Toronto, that was under Mike Babcock, under Lou Lamoriello at the time. I mean, we're two GMs down the road from that point in time. DJ obviously went and got head coaching experience in Ottawa, finished last season on the bench in LA, and believe he still has an option to return there. And yeah, I think that there's at least a little smoke to the possibility of that happening in Toronto. But he's got decisions to make too. I mean, this is still this strange time. There's a number of jobs that aren't filled around the league, and so I feel like unless you really want a certain job, you don't want to take yourself out of the running for others. And so we'll just have to see how everything shakes down. But there's still 4 or 5 head coaching jobs open right now, and so. I think that there would be some appeal on both ends to DJ coming back to Toronto, but nothing done as of this time.
Who's holding this up? Like this is the most wide open that we've kind of seen coaching job availability in a long time between like head coaches and assistants. Berube was hired. I found it very interesting that Rod Brind'Amour signed with Carolina the very next day. So who's holding up what? Is it the head coaching jobs, or is it a team like the Leafs who has deep pockets for assistant coaching jobs?
Well, the Leafs certainly impacted, in an alternate world where the Leafs don't fire Sheldon Keefe right after that loss. I mean, maybe Craig Berube takes a job in New Jersey, right? I mean, he doesn't live too far from there. He was, it had discussions with them about that. And so it doesn't reset the search in New Jersey, but then New Jersey's waiting to see like, well, Sheldon Keefe want to, engage here. And I still don't think they have a good idea for sure that he does or doesn't. As you can imagine, Sheldon's in a pretty enviable spot. I think that as much as the Leafs didn't break through and have massive playoff success under his watch. I mean, it's hard not to look at his overall record as a coach. He's got 2 years under contract still where he's going to be paid. Like, I think it's fair to say he can be a little bit picky and choosy, and you know, you got a young family. I mean, I think he's the second youngest coach in the NHL when he was fired. I think only Spencer Carberry is a younger head coach, and you know, but he has 5 seasons on the Leafs bench, and so he's in a great spot. And so I think what holds it up is, you know, other teams get involved, and then New Jersey's got to figure out what they're doing. You know, Winnipeg has talked to McClellan, talked to Berube, but do they want to, you know, they got Scarter O'Neill there. Like, does he end up getting, like, I think a lot of teams were considering a lot of things. Remember, even New Jersey ended the season with Travis Green as their interim coach, and he went to Ottawa. And so I think I don't know if there's like one team, but certainly the Leafs having an opening, at least briefly, puts the cooler on things, because, you know, it's no secret that they have more money to spend on these kind of decisions than most other organizations probably would be willing to. And so if you're Craig Berube and then all of a sudden this other team is there, and, you know, it kind of makes sense that everything else goes on hold wherever else you might be in discussions with. So, you know, I don't think it'll be too much longer now before we start to see more fall into place. And then on top of that, teams losing in the second round don't typically fire their coach. Teams losing in the third round don't typically fire their coach. And so I don't think we're going to see any more firings. Now it's just a matter of the remaining few, whether it's LA, Seattle, New Jersey, to make some decisions, and then Winnipeg as well.
This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Shady Rays. Sunnies. Sunny G's. No, it's not the name of them. They're Shady Rays. Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. I know this because I have Shady Rays, and I wear them, and I love them, and they haven't broken yet. Steve, it shouldn't be impressive that your Shady Rays haven't broken yet. It is, actually, because I have a nearly 4-year-old son who is the single most destructive force in the universe. So the fact that these Shady Rays have survived all of that is a testament. And that is why they have been rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. They have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. Go to shadyrays.com and use the code Johnston for 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. Listen, it's May. It's already late in the season, but it's not too late. If you need sunnies, you need to get them anyway. Go to shadyrays.com and use the code Johnston for 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. This episode of the CJ Show is brought to you by Shopify. I know a thing or two about Shopify because the SDPN shop is powered by Shopify. SDPN shop.ca. Allow me to plug that in the middle of this plug. Listen, Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US, powering things like Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across over 170 countries. Sign up for a $1 per month, $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Johnston. All lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Johnston to take your business to the next level today. Shopify.com/Johnston. So we're treating, we fans are treating some moves with the Leafs like they're a foregone conclusion. I'm willing to bet the Leafs didn't sign Craig Berube, and then he turned to them and said, "Boy, I can't wait to coach Mitch Marner next season." Like, I gotta feel there's a plan there, and it feels like he's not involved in it. What's your read on what's happening with him, with John Tavares as well? And if something is going to happen, when is it going to happen? Because we've been theorizing on the show, it'll be after July 1st when their bonuses are paid.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would be surprised if John Tavares was in any mind to waive his no movement clause. Like, I just think that he put his eggs in his basket, if you want to call it. He chose the Leafs when he could have gone to Dallas. He could have went to Tampa. He could have went to San Jose. at the time. Who else am I forgetting in that mix? He had real
A lot of
Boston,
teams.
but
Yep.
that was like the final five. Were those teams? I mean, he was thinking the right things. Those teams in that window have either gone to a cup final or been competitive. Maybe only San Jose's fallen off, but who knows with him there instead of Erik Karlsson, maybe that deal doesn't. Anyway, we could let's not go too far into the past and what could have been. But he chose the Leafs. He's got 3 young kids born in Toronto. Honestly, it's funny. I'm almost a little tainted watching him here at the World Hockey Championship. Like for me, he's been Canada's best player here. And I do wonder if we haven't, in some ways, in Toronto, overlooked him to a degree or underrated him. I realize there's a lot of shiny toys, and he's not necessarily establishing. He's not chasing a 70-goal season. So I'm not by any means diminishing Austin Matthews, but from his two-way play is pretty darn good. And I think in a world where he's not making 11 million, which will be the world a year from now, I don't think wherever he's playing, I don't think anyone's gonna have a problem with his contract or where he's at. So
he's a great player. It's the cap hit.
Yeah. Well, but I think I just would be surprised if he's of any mind to waive, to consider a move. And then obviously the organization has decisions to make. Do you then try to extend him at a lesser amount? So then, can you get value there? Do you want a clean break? I mean, I don't know how they're going to navigate that. And frankly, I don't think those discussions have really happened. I mean, Tavares has been over here in Prague since just days after the season. So I think that's kind of in a pause position. The Marner one's interesting because, really you can work this one where everyone wins, but it takes trust and it takes an ability. It takes a desire or a willingness to work together. And they kind of need each other for that to work. And if that dissipates for any reason, or if that doesn't present itself, I mean, it could be an everyone loses situation too, right? I mean, if the Leafs can't find a way to move him in a way that makes sense for them and he gets an extension as part of it, then he's coming back to Toronto in the fall for what's an important season, right? It's his platform season, entering unrestricted free agency. Where, how does that look? Like where the pressure on him, the discussion around him. I mean, I think that's what everyone's banking on. Is it really, as much as he's a hometown guy and he's obviously a huge star of the team, I'm not sure that it makes sense for everyone to come back. I think they got to find a solution together, but I don't get the feeling that's happening yet. And so after July 1st makes a ton of sense for him, just because that his final bonus payment comes then. And then in terms of actual money, I mean, he's still an expensive player, just under $11 million cap hit for next season, but the actual dollars at the door aren't much. And it actually might give the next team more of an ability to sign him to a higher number on an 8-year deal, because in that team's mind, they're like, okay, here's what the cap looks like for 9 years, but the actual dollars at the door are here. And so there's a way that I think when we're talking about aligning incentives where it aligns for the Leafs that they can maybe get a return that makes sense, do some other things that make sense. And then for him, it allows him to sign a contract that he can't even necessarily get on the open market. And certainly on the open market, if he goes to the following July 1st, he can only get a 7-year deal too. And when you make the kind of money he's going to make per year, it's no small amount of dough that you're talking about to do it. So, it's going to take you really got to thread a needle here to make this work. But I do think when you step back, when you take emotion out of it, when you take the hyperbole of everything around the Leafs out of it, it just makes sense for Mitch to want to maybe chart his next spot if they want to move on without him, and to sign an extension this summer rather than, as much as I know Darren Ferris clients often are taken right to free agency, there's risk in that, especially in this circumstance. If he drives a hard bargain or if he says, absolutely not, I will not consider being moved.
Does he potentially look at a different agent? Because that would be nice.
Look at that. I don't think so. I mean, he's been, I've never heard anything like that. I mean, they've been together a long time, and, ultimately it's one thing to blame agents, but because agents do negotiate for their clients, but if the client doesn't like what's happening, then they can move on. And that's never happened in this case.
I'm notably very anti-agent. Don't send this to Alan Walsh. I want to move on to other teams, but not before. I would be remiss if we didn't play staying or going.
Okay.
Staying or going, and I'm going to give you the option, CJ, because we came up with a great system at our live show at the rec room for the All-Star game. Staying or going, and you have the option to give your answer, staying or going, along with CJ 1 through 8.
Okay.
CJ 1 is you're not very sure. CJ 8 is it's happening, damn it.
All right.
All right.
I'm in.
I got the cap-friendly page up. Let's make this nice and easy. Austin Matthews.
TJ8 staying.
Yeah. William Nylander.
TJ8 staying.
John Tavares.
TJ7 staying.
Okay.
I just have to leave the smallest bit of wiggle room.
Right. Mitchell Marner.
TJ3. No. Going. I'm trying to think though how high I want to rate that. TJ4.
So that's 50-50 then. Ish. No.
Yeah, you have to remember he's got to prove everything right down to the last minute. Like I think it's more than likely to happen, but right down to the end, he has to sign off on it. So it just because it's more than likely as we sit here at the end of May, there's just a lot of things that can happen between then and now.
3 years remaining. David Kampf.
Staying CJ6.
2 years remaining. Kalle Yarncroke.
Staying CJ6.
2 years remaining. Ryan Reeves.
Staying CJ8.
Bobby McMahon. 2 years.
Staying CJ8.
Yeah, he just signed. This is interesting. Matthew Nyes.
You think there's any world they're going to let him go?
No, but like if they're gonna go out and make this huge change, like we talked about how badly they need a defenseman, right? Or like an elite defenseman.
Staying CJ8.
Okay, good.
I think the way they saw him play in the playoffs, like there's just no way you can.
He's the longer the season went on, the more I was like, oh my God, this guy's going to be a problem. I love him.
Yeah. And it's like he understood all of a sudden. Somehow you got in those, the temperature got turned to 15 out of 10. And he was able to rise to that. Like he was throwing his weight around, was showing a sort of swagger. Like that was, if they traded him after that playoff series, I would be stunned.
I'd be stunned too. Another guy who really grew on me as the season went on, Pontus Holmberg.
Also over here at the World Championships. I'll say staying CJ7.
Okay. Newly acquired, just got shoulder surgery, Connor Dewar. He's an RFA.
Staying CJ5.
I had no idea this player was an RFA. I guess because I didn't realize how young he was. Noah Gregor.
Ooh.
They have his rights. They could technically just let him walk.
I'll say going CJ4.
Okay. Juicy. 22 years old, RFA, Nick Robertson.
Staying CJ5.
Okay. UFA.
He's cheap, right? He's not going to, there's obviously not a perfect player, and there's things you could point to that they wish he could be more of. They wish he could be bigger, blah, 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 blah. He's going to be cheap, and they need some cap bargains.
When you say cheap, do you mean something in the neighborhood of Bobby McMahon, 1.35, or even less than that potentially?
I think something maybe a little more than that. It's tough.
Yeah,
Bobby
he scores a lot of goals.
He scores a lot of goals. Like that's the thing. I haven't done the comparables and I haven't made enough calls to say anything too credibly on that, but I think that he's scored enough in pretty limited minutes to maybe get a bit more than that. But I mean, look, cheap as anything under $2 million, in the NHL nowadays. I mean, I don't know what the average salary is, but it's above 2 million. So I think he's going to still be cheaper than the average player.
Interesting. Okay. 29-year-old UFA Tyler Bertuzzi.
Going DJ 5.
That's better than I thought. Honestly, that's better than I thought.
They have interest in
29-year-old
keeping him, but I just think that he can be a UFA. I think he's going to test the market.
Do you have any hold on what kind of number Bertuzzi can ask for? Because he had such a weird season.
It was a weird season. I think the number he's probably most interested in is how many years he's signing for. I think that, after going Detroit to Boston the previous year, 1-year deal in Toronto on the second or third day of free agency, whatever that was last summer, I think he's looking for security. And I don't know that the Leafs are going to want to ultimately go there with him on the kind of number he's looking for. I mean, whether it's 5 times 5, maybe a bit above that, a lot.
Final forward, 29-year-old UFA Max Domi.
Staying CJ 7.
Wow. Okay, that's a big one for a UFA staying CJ 7. Wow.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, dude, it's funny. One thing that stood out to me in that playoff series against Boston, at one point, John Tavares made a comment. He's like, Max feels like he's part of the fabric of our team. And I just thought, wow, like for someone who's only been there, it was her first season, the way it worked with Matthews towards the end of the year. And, same agent as Austin Matthews. I think the Max has a desire to stay. I think it's much more likely than not he remains a Leaf.
Okay, that's juicy. Morgan Riley, a number of years remaining at 7.5. He's 30 years old. He has a full no move.
Staying CJ 8.
Yeah. 1 year remaining at $2 million. 30-year-old Jake McCabe.
Staying CJ 8.
Okay. Newly extended Simone Benoit.
CJ 8 staying.
Yep. Connor Timmins, 1 year left, 25 years old, 1.1 mil.
Going CJ 4.
Okay.
I don't see
Cade Weber just got here.
Yeah, CJ 8. I mean, they went and traded for his rights. They gave up a draft pick, right? I mean, he was traveling in the playoffs. I mean, he wasn't ever, I don't think, a thought to play, but like he's part of the future.
And now we got a ton of free agents. 25-year-old RFA Timothy Liljegren.
I'd say going CJ 5.
Okay, strong going there. And that would have to be a trade. Interesting. Well, they could let him walk.
Yeah, or you don't extend him a qualifying offer. But I mean, I think he's still an asset, honestly. Trade is more likely.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised. 33-year-old UFA TJ Brody.
Going CJ 8.
Wow. Okay.
He played one game in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And he was healthy as far as I know, right?
Oh, yeah. I just think the guy started off on their top pairing and ended the year as a healthy scratch. I mean, there's lots of mitigating circumstances and went through some family tragedy last summer and all those things. But it just doesn't feel like, you can bring him back after that. I mean, that's a pretty precipitous fall off.
Yeah, that's fair. Newly acquired 30-year-old UFA defenseman Joel Edmondson.
I'd say going CJ 5.
Okay, so there's a door there. There's a window. He could be back. Newly acquired 30-year-old defenseman UFA Ilya Lyubushkin.
I'm going to say staying, but only CJ 4. Like, I'm not saying with a lot of conviction. And we've already seen this movie once, right? But I thought he played pretty well. In talking with Ilya a little bit, like I got the sense he said it felt like coming home a little bit, this trade back to Toronto. Like I think he's very open to it, and I think he fits a profile. It's just the question is for him, is there more money to be made on July 1st? And that's the only reason I'm just not sure the Leafs can pay him top dollar, but then at a certain point, do you want to move again?
If I were his
Arizona,
agent,
Toronto, Buffalo, Anaheim, Toronto in the last like 4
yeah,
years.
stop signing for more money with the worst teams in the universe. Like, dude, he has not played on a variety of very good teams. Like, the Leafs are the best one by far, and their bar for success it's pretty mid, right over the last little bit. Oldest active skater in the NHL, 40-year-old UFA Mark Giordano.
Going CJ8.
Yeah. Martin Jones, UFA.
Ooh, going CJ5.
He might stay. Okay.
But like very unlikely. But like I think he's open to it. But nothing against Martin. I just think they're going to go another direction.
I got the impression this will be a CJ10 just based on Brad Treliving's words at his press conference. UFA Ilya Samsonov.
Going CJ billion.
Yeah. Okay, great. Good to know. 1 year left at 776,000 before he's an RFA. It's unbelievable. Joseph Wool.
Staying CJ a billion.
Staying CJ a billion. I like that. Okay.
I mean, he's making under the salary cap high, and he did play really well in winning games 5 and 6 against Boston.
Yeah, under the salary cap minimum, and he might be their starter next year.
Yeah. Now, he's got to stay healthy. There's a lot of pressure on Joe, but
yeah,
because of the way everything ended. But they're still they believe in him in that organization that he's going to be good enough.
As they should. And two guys on the injured reserve. UFA John Klingberg.
I'll say going CJ6.
Wow, so you're leaving the door open. He could be back.
Just the smallest crack. You know, we were there the day that they did the so it was 2 days after the final game against Boston. They did the player media avail on that Monday after they lost Saturday night. And, you know, there's like a little press box at the practice rink where we're all doing our work. All of a sudden, like a player comes out. Oh, nice. I'm like, who's that? John Klingberg, still 2 days after the season, working out with medical staff. And so, you know, obviously he's under contract with the team through June 30th. So, you know, he's trying to get himself healthy after the hip resurfacing procedure. So, you know, I haven't been able to get a clear answer that he's 100% gone, but it's just the fact they put that amount of time and energy into helping him rehab. I have to think there's at least an opportunity, maybe, or a slight chance that they try to bring him back.
And finishing it with another guy who they've put a lot of resources into, Matt Murray, UFA.
I'd say going CJ7.
So that's an even tinier crack there. That's I'm not sure. That's basically gone, but there's a chance.
Yeah, that's like
what
I'm
AHL
putting it at
deal?
like the 5% chance on it. I think the goaltending position is too important for them to take a gamble. Whereas, you know, if you're talking about signing one of 8 NHL defensemen, if you were to bring Klingberg back, like I think in a weird way there's a little less gamble there because there's other ways to make up for it if it doesn't work.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Well, a riveting edition of Staying or Going with CJ as we approach as we exceed the hour mark, and Adam Wilde cries a million tears. Just a few things going around the league before we wrap everything up. I alluded to this earlier. Rod Brind'Amour signed his extension with the Hurricanes. I think it was only announced today, but it was reported the day after the Leafs signed Craig Berube. Do I put my tinfoil hat on, yes or no?
No. In this case, I think it's more to do with the timing of the end of Carolina's season.
Fair.
You know, I think if Rod Brind'Amour was available, had become available, the Leafs would have, you know, certainly looked at him and seen if there's a fit there. But it just, you know, he had a handshake agreement throughout the second round with Carolina, and they finally got finished with wrapping it up when he got the season done. And so, you know, I don't think this one was really about the Leafs. I can understand why you're making the link. Like, you're not the only one, and it makes some sense. And you know, really my understanding was getting a bit confused because days of the week with being in Europe and time blending on top of itself. But the Leafs announced the Friday they announced Berube's contract. I think they were negotiating with him on Thursday before Carolina had been even beat out. So, I think that the Leafs, I just don't think Brind'Amour ever really factored into the Leafs decision making because it was clear he wasn't going to be available to them even before all this officially got done with the Hurricanes.
Why do Brind'Amour and the Hurricanes always have to do this so publicly?
I think it's because Tom Dundon is a difficult negotiator and in some ways needs to be pushed into making decisions.
Okay.
And in that case, the push comes publicly eventually, right? Rod Brind'Amour, if Rod Brind'Amour really wanted to become a free agent, he could make a lot more money somewhere else. There's just no secret to that. And way more than his owner would ever even think of paying him or any other head coach for that matter. But, the fact that Brind'Amour has said more than once, I only want to coach in Carolina. And if you're on the other side of the negotiating table from that, you're going to be like, okay, I hear you. And so I'm not going to pay you any more than I need to. And I'm not going to do any more than I need to keep you, even though we like you. And so it ends up being this kind of, public drawn out thing. The other part of it is I do believe Dundon's comfortable operating his team in a different way. And so I don't just mean this with negotiations, but he doesn't bat an eye at the idea of I'm going to walk you right to you could be a free agent. I mean, he let his GM, Don Waddell, interview in Minnesota. Well, and then brought him back as GM after that time. So he's very much, whereas I think typically teams are of the mind, it becomes a distraction if someone isn't signed. We got to extend them a year out. I think he, as an owner, is very comfortable just letting all that kind of unfold as it does and push something right to the deadline. And so that explains how we got here. Now, right, it was into the second round. They'd won the first round and Brind'Amour still doesn't have a contract and things are getting out publicly. And I know of teams when he was a free agent a couple years ago that tried to, roll out a $5 or $6 million contract to him to lure him into a free agency. And he didn't get anywhere close to that in Carolina. So, I mean, he just wants to stay there. So, which is fine. Like that I don't even question his decision making, but it does make the negotiation a little more tough when the other person doesn't think there's any chance you're leaving.
Okay. What is the time difference in Prague? Is it 6 or 7 hours? And are you able to watch any playoff hockey?
It is 6 hours. I haven't watched too much since I got here, except I did see the end of the Dallas, Colorado double overtime game. And in fact, I saw single overtime because I woke up at 7 a.m. and it was still very much on. So,
wow.
I will say this. It's funny, when I covered this tournament years ago, the internet, even in 2012, which was the last World Championships I was at, highlights and things just weren't as prevalent as they are now. And so I felt more removed from it. Whereas now I feel like before I get out of bed in the morning, I can see like the goals. I have a good idea of what the storylines are. Like the world has gotten smaller even in that 10 or 12 years. And so it actually has given me a window into how European fans experience the sport. And I think it's actually less of a big deal than it ever was, the time zones. I mean, you're not watching as much live, but you can still see it pretty soon after it's ended, before the next day started, and get a pretty good idea of what happened. And so, it's kind of interesting. I feel as though the world has never been this small. And so I don't feel as cut off. And, I come home in a couple of days here and I'll be right back on the beat. So it'll almost be like I didn't miss anything, even though I've been over here not watching the games live.
I want to do 3 more things. 2 of them are hockey related. One is existential.
Okay.
Eastern Conference Final, Rangers, Panthers. You don't have to pick a winner, because I know you hate doing that. What to you is, you can pick a winner if you want. What to you is the most intriguing storyline about that series?
Can the Rangers keep doing it for me? Like, I don't know, actually. I don't have a good sense of who's viewed as the favorite, like broadly, like from fans. But I certainly feel like it's Florida's series to lose. And I don't mean to hate on the Rangers. Obviously, they won the President's Trophy. They've ripped through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. I mean, it's hard to find fault with them. It just feels as though that is Florida's series to win, given that they were in the Cup final a year ago, how deep they are, the way they've come through the playoffs. And so seeing how I think it's going to be a chaotic series. I mean, you put Adam Fox and the band of brothers that the Panthers roll out there in the same series. Jacob Trouba, I should mention, more than Fox. I mean, like I think it's going to be, rather violent as the series go. And so, I'm just kind of fascinated to see how that plays out. But to see whether the Rangers can hang with that is maybe what I'm most interested in from that Eastern Conference Final.
The first Matt Rempe penalty of the series is how far into the series? My take is 8 minutes.
Could I do like the Price is Right? Like I'll take the $1.
Yeah.
So I'll take $7.59, or is it were to be? Yeah. Anyway, I think it'll be even quicker than 8 minutes.
Yeah, I'll say the 8th minute, and you can take the 7th minute.
Yes, because I'm with you. I mean, it's going to be a tone-setting first 10 minutes for sure. I mean, any series is already, and then given again the number of players that are prone to chaos in that series, and Rempe being at the top of the list from the Rangers end of things. I mean, I feel good about the 7th minute.
My guess for the first 10 minutes of that series is there's no puck. There's no puck. We don't have a Western Conference final yet. We're waiting on the winner of Edmonton, Vancouver to play Dallas. Who's winning Game 7?
Edmonton.
Okay. Do you have a final score prediction?
Ooh, 3-1. I think it'll be a close, tight game. Maybe an empty net goal. Like I don't see a repeat of the other night. I know the Oilers, held serve pretty well at home there. Man, it's a tough one to call. I just think even being down Besser hurts the Canucks, and there's so much riding on this series in particular for the Oilers, and they've been there. They've been to the conference final 2 years ago. I just think they're going to bring a really good effort in Game 7 and find a way to sneak through.
Okay. Last one.
How do you feel?
Oh, for the Besser's been so special in these playoffs, and to not have him, it would be an incredible story. For the Canucks to beat the Oilers. Be a hell of a time for Petey to have the game of the playoffs. I put a lot of stock into the Oilers before the playoffs. It would be recency bias to go with the Canucks. I'll say the Oilers as well.
Okay, it's funny.
My friend Michael Bublé, I would like the Canucks, but
I will say, oh, look at you dropping names. I love that.
Mike, my close friend Mike.
I was speaking to an NHL player here at the World Championships who actually came, like we were just chatting casually, and he's like, "What do you think, Edmonton, Vancouver?" And it was his contention that Vancouver plays a much better team game. He said that he actually found them to be a tougher team to play against the last couple of years than Edmonton, but noted that Edmonton has the game breakers, right? They have the guys, they have the thing that other teams don't have. Like McDavid could just win games on his own, and Draisaitl, obviously. So, he was feeling Vancouver at that point. I think that was definitely before the series had got to Game 7. It was a couple days ago. But anyway, for what it's worth, there are NHL players out there who think that you and I are wrong. So,
asking for a friend who may or may not have flew a little too close to the insider sun about a week ago. What was the first story that you ever broke, and how did you decide that you had enough information to break it?
Oh,
or one of the first?
I don't know about the first. The one that always sticks in my mind, because it was definitely the most nervous I've ever been, was the whole Ryan O'Reilly offer sheet with the Flames. And it's sort of a nuanced story. And for those that aren't familiar, like I'm not going to bore you with all the exact details, but I got a tip on that one at about say 5 or 6 at night. Like I remember around the dinner hour, and I didn't end up putting the story out until the morning. And that was a very sleepless night. It involved a lot of phone calls and emails and confirming. And even
Yeah.
even when it was ultimately sent, I'll say this: I had confirmation from a high enough level that I felt good about it, but it's still, you got this feeling with your story that you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't done it, it's when you hit send on something, or like when something hits the world and you're saying this is happening, and before anyone else has it. I mean, that's part of the fun. But then there's like that period where you just feel out there alone and naked on a clothesline or something
Yep.
and I remember that feeling very distinctly from that story. Naturally, that story initially, like the Flames came out or whoever at the time and said I was all wrong and this and that. Um, Turns out, I mean, I'm not going to reveal my sources even to this day, but I put it this way: I'm comfortable with what I reported, and the way I knew it was time is that I had 4 or 5 people that knew enough about the details to say that I was right. And
4 or 5. Goodness
yeah,
gracious.
I mean, it's a
Good for
different
you.
era though, too. It's sort of like what I'm saying about being here. Like, I don't know, maybe if I was confronted with a similar situation today, I wouldn't have time to get 4 or 5, or I would feel the pressure not to. Like, I knew that one, I just had to be right, I guess, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I knew I couldn't afford to be wrong. So I hope that doesn't hurt you existentially, because that's not my intent. But that's the first time I remember being like truly crapping my pants on the story.
Well, I was like, CJ, I don't know how you do this. This is so uncomfortable. I hate this feeling. Lessons were learned. Put it that way.
Don't be hard on yourself. I mean, the flip side is I thought you handled that as well as you could handle it from when you came to believe it was not as credible as you initially thought. So, I mean, you didn't make it up. What you reported was certainly something that has been discussed as being planned. Maybe if you were guilty of anything, is you just got a little too far ahead of where it was. But like it's like nuance is my point. It wasn't like you fell for an April Fool's joke and it was something that like just isn't happening, which has also happened to credible reporters too. I don't understand. That's the part of April Fools I don't like, is like when
Oh
like.
man. Yeah.
But anyway, not to go down that, but like, and then you owned your stuff, and so look, at nobody's perfect. I've made lots of mistakes, and I try to be like what you did there. As if I make a mistake that I become aware of, I certainly will own it. I mean, after Game 4 of the Leafs Bruins series, I wrote, "This is the end of the Maple Leafs as we know them." I may have still ended up being right, but the team won Game 5 and 6 and was one shot away from winning Game 7, and so not quite the same thing, but we all are guilty maybe of getting ahead of ourselves from time to time.
Well, one, that team looked dead after Game 4, and 2, like, I don't know, you ended up being right anyway. Like, to me, winning that series wouldn't have changed my mind about what needed to be done with the Leafs. They would have had to have gone to at least the Final Four. And
Yeah,
as
but
for the story that I broke, I still think there's a story there. It's just not the one that I broke.
right.
I got the information right. I got the story wrong. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I do, and it does make sense to me, and that's sort of what I'm saying is like you weren't wrong. You just didn't like you maybe didn't frame it quite right, but you weren't wrong about like this isn't a totally made up thing that was never going to happen 100%. You just maybe and look at when you're doing things in real time, like if you got to write stories or if you're commenting like when your LFR videos, like you're going to be wrong from time to time. Like everything is easier when you're looking backwards. When you're living it in the moment, it's a little there's a lot more to weed through, and I think that's all that how I view that from where I'm sitting here, pal.
well, thanks, pal. Listen, I hope you enjoy your whiskey bar or hookah lounge or whatever you're getting up to tonight. An hour and 16 minutes we're at. Adam, I assume, is going to be quite upset. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope the audience enjoyed it. CJ, any final thoughts?
Well, and I hope Julian's enjoying his vacation too, because the man works very hard for us and for at the Athletic and everywhere else he works. So thanks for stepping in for him, pal, and enjoy Game 7.
I will.
That's one I will consider staying up for here in Prague, or like going to bed and sleeping 3 hours and getting up for, because Game 7, Edmonton, Vancouver is going to be pretty special.
Attaboy. Yeah, no, I don't think there will be any regrets there. Well, this has been the CJ Show with Chris Johnston and me, your fill-in host, Steve Dangle. That is it for this episode of the CJ Show. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this podcast. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. What should we tell them?
Well, come back, Steve. I want you to come back on sometime.
Yeah, tell them to come back.
The Chris Johnston Show. Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK and McKenzie.